Thank you for joining us on the Photo Flunky Show. Today is episode 89.
Ooh.
I know, we're getting up there, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
On today's show, we've got 5 tips for a better photographic composition. Hi, my name is William Beem.
Hi, my name is Lee Beem.
Lee, do you know what better photographic composition means?
It's the way that you have your subjects arranged within the frame.
Okay, you can stay on the show.
Oh, yay.
All right, before we start talking about photographic composition, I just want to let you know that show notes are going to be available at williambeem.com/episode 89. And you can get a transcript of the show there for free. Of course, there are links to subscribe there. And you can find all of our shows at photoflunky.com. And also, if you are a Mac user, I've got a discount coupon code for you for Mac Fun. It's 10% on most products for Luminar and Aurora HDR. It is a $10 discount. The code is my last name, Beem, B as in boy, E-E-M. And if you're not a Mac user, if you're a Windows user, I've got another link. I'll put it on the show notes so you can get a beta version of Luminar for Windows. It is absolutely free, and then it'll come out later on this year. You know, if it comes out and you like it and you're happy with it, then of course that coupon code will work for you too if you decide to buy it then. For right now, Luminar for Windows is a beta version. It's free. I'll have a link for you on the show notes. Photographic composition. You just said this is really what it's about. It's about how you're arranging your subject and what your photograph is going to be.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of rules that people have put out over there. Probably the most basic one I think that comes out is the rule of thirds. In other words, you're supposed to put your subject somewhere along the line on the rule of thirds, or maybe at the intersection of one of those. Who says you can't center your subject?
Well, me, because when you say rule of something, as soon as I hear the word rule, it means a suggestion or a recommendation. There are no rules in my life.
Well, I agree with you there. Because
there are laws.
The rule of thirds, to me, those are guidelines.
Yeah.
But what you're really serving is what makes your subject the most interesting in your composition.
There is. And I think it's a great place to start for somebody who is trying to figure out how to do this. I think breaking things down so that they can learn how to see it. It's not natural for everybody. I don't think it's a bad thing. But when these rules of thirds and centering things and all these other complicated things come out, I've got a bit more of a creative background. And I look at it and I think, well, I know if the stuff's balanced or not. I can look at it and feel it. Not everybody can. So I think you just need to find your place within there. You might start out using the rules as basic guidelines, and please, they are guidelines. And then move on from there as you find yourself within your photography.
I kind of agree with that because a lot of people start off with a rule of thirds, and it's a good guideline to start off with because you don't necessarily understand why something works within the rule of thirds, but it kind of gets you there. And the idea is you're supposed to look at it and evaluate your photographs and grow. And then there are people that take these rules almost as if they're laws, say you can't center your subject. Your photo looks bad if your subject's centered. And I thought, well, that's really not true. It depends upon your subject. And
my favorite is when somebody, you have a photo posted somewhere and somebody shows up and tells you, well, according to the rule of, or the law of whatever, and they start citing it. I think to myself, well, I've got a not so polite gesture for that law. If this is about a photo, you're welcome to use it, but I'm not applying it to mine.
You know what? I like some of these things as guidelines, and it's a good place to start. Some people hold on to them and they never grow beyond that, and then they will criticize other photographs. I've got a shot of the exterior of the Lincoln Memorial. It is centered in the frame. It works that way. If I tried to put it anywhere else, at least for the composition that I've got, it wouldn't work. You'd think it's too close to one edge and not enough to the other. Maybe if you backed off, several hundred yards, then you might want to put the whole building, onto one side or another, or higher or lower. But for where you're standing dead center, it gives you a real sense of power to have something centered and looming large in the photo.
It really does. And I think that's a good example because with symmetry that is found within your subject, some things lend themselves very well to fit within this guideline.
Well, that kind of goes to our next tip.
Is
balance and symmetry are your friends?
Yes, they are. And architecture, you do usually, not always, but you usually want some balance and symmetry. But balance and symmetry, people look at these as lines. I often look at them as colors and where the light is in the photo, because to me, that's a much more powerful way. I don't want somebody to technically move through my photo. I would rather have fewer people appreciate it and have the people who get what I'm seeing love it. I can take the haters and kind of shrug them off if I'm in a good mood and feel like having some fun. I might mess with them a little bit, but it really depends what you see within that frame.
Well, you actually brought up a really nice concept that I think a lot of photographers miss. I mean, they're thinking of balance and symmetry working within lines, within the edges of their subject, but you're talking about it within color.
And that is the way that I interpret things. That is how I see things, and we all see things differently. So it's not really a right or wrong. It's not to say that color is more important than the lines and balance and symmetry, but you find your own, the way that you interpret things, the way that you balance things out. And I think people are pretty good now. We've been almost trained through photography forums and hearing advice and reading books and going through courses that everything is about drawing lines. And that's great for somebody starting out who's trying to grasp the concept. It goes well beyond that. And I think if you're going to stop with the lines, you're shortchanging yourself.
Well, this is one of the things I find funny that kind of contradicts, the rule of thirds. People will talk about leading lines. And what do they do with their leading lines? They always put it dead center.
Yes.
And I thought, well, that's not on the rule of thirds.
It's not.
They tell you rule of thirds and leading lines, but those kind of conflict with each other the way it's generally taught.
Yeah, and I have a history with rules. I don't actually break them as much as
you reinterpret them.
Them. I don't go by what is stated that you must do. I look and see, okay, does it specifically say I shouldn't? And then I work within that.
Well, I think what people misunderstand, and I've said this probably earlier, but I'll go ahead and say it again. They misinterpret the rules as the most important thing, whereas I think the visual interest of what you're shooting is the most important thing.
Yes, it is.
And the rules, are there to help guide you. But if they guide you to a place where it's really not an interesting photo, then how have they served you?
Well, if you want to impress technical photographers, and I think there are certain genres where it has its place, then that is great. But if you have viewers who are not necessarily photographers and you want to put your picture up somewhere as art or, as a story or a message, you've got to break beyond that.
A lot of photographers are technical photographers. And here's another thing I've said before. Creativity is the intersection of technical skill and imagination.
Yeah.
You've got to have the skills in order to make the capture.
Yes, you do.
You've got to have the imagination to come up with something interesting.
Yeah.
And when you put those two together, that's your creativity. That's really what it means is, how can I take this technical skill that I have? I mean, we can go out and take technically perfect photos all day long, but that doesn't make them interesting.
Yeah.
It's the imagination combining with it to make something creative that's really fun.
Well, that's what brings out your unique interpretation. That's what makes it kind of puts your own mark on what you do.
When you're looking at balance in a frame, what are you looking for?
Again, the balance could be related to light. It's all about the way that the eye moves across the photo. We spoke last week about where the eye is drawn.
Mm-hmm.
All these, if you want to go back, it'll be the previous podcast, which is 88,
Episode
right?
88, yes.
Yeah. So you can go and hear that. I think that's the easier way to sum that up, because we discussed that in a bit more detail. But when you're looking at a picture, for me, it's feel. I do understand that not everybody feels their picture. That's just the way I'm wired. But your balance might be about lines. It might be about a sense of weight. It might be light. And sometimes you very specifically disturb the balance where you want somebody hanging into a corner because that creates a different mood. You might want them tension, like pulling into the center, or so you can use this to your advantage depending on the message you're trying to portray.
And that's one of the reasons I say balance and symmetry are your friends. Not saying that every photo has to be balanced. Every photo must have symmetry. Sometimes you can break those elements to create tension in your photo. And that's a different kind of interest and a different kind of mood.
Yeah.
And that's your imagination with the technical skills again. That's your creativity. All right. Another item to come up with is, it's a saying I heard, it's called a pattern interrupted catches the eye. You can see a row of a number of things. Let's say one of them is just different. Maybe it's out of order. Maybe it's a different color. But something like that, for some reason, people look and say, oh, I like that.
Yes.
I'm even going to go back to the photograph I took of the Lincoln Memorial. If you go out, look at that from the exterior, from the front, you've got all the columns there, and then you've got this grand staircase leading up to it.
Yeah.
In my photo, there's one man sitting on one of the steps up there, just taking a break. And that kind of interrupts the pattern of the stairs.
Yeah.
And I think it's perfect that he was there. Usually I'm the kind of person, when I want to take a photo of something, if there's somebody in the way, I'm thinking, damn tourist, get out of my way. He actually made the photo for me. He was a solitary person there on those steps. And that was the perfect place for him to be.
Well, it's kind of your message in that photo. When I look at something like that, it's like, I have a very good grasp of the technicalities of making this perfect. And I did. But here's my cheeky side that kind of abandons the rule.
Well, what I liked about it was these memorials and monuments in Washington, D.C. are there for the people.
Yeah.
Taking a photo of it without a person in it, you got too many people, it's just a clutter. Yes. But one person right there in that spot, just taking there, sitting down, I think he was probably smoking a cigarette, I don't know. He made it perfect because it was for the people and he represented that. He was a representation and he also interrupted, that staircase. It would have been a nice photo without him, but I think it was more poignant with him.
And here's the thing about a photo like that. When you have, it's kind of a subtle message. It immediately catches attention, but people don't consciously think about it. I love photos like that because you don't have to explain yourself. It's there and they're aware of it, but it doesn't make them have to think. And the viewer shouldn't have to think. They should feel something.
No, you don't need to beat them over the head with something. And you know what? There are probably people who've looked at that photo and never thought of it the same way I described it. That's the way I look at it.
Well, we perceive things differently, and I think that's something that we accept.
Okay. Here's number 4. Give your subjects breathing room.
Yes.
And here's kind of what I'm talking about. And this almost goes back to the rule of thirds in a way. If you have a photo of, let's say, a person and they're looking in one direction or another, maybe you've got a photograph of a car that's driving down the road, a horse that's running or something like that. You don't want to put the nose of that object right up against the edge of your photo where it looks like they're just about out of your photo. You kind of want to put them on the other side so they've got room to run. But it doesn't even have to be that. I've seen photographs of, just a wall with a solitary window in it. And you don't want to put that window too close to the edge. You want to give it a little bit of negative space.
Especially if there's light rays coming through it. You want the light rays to flow into the negative space.
So when you're thinking of breathing room, are you thinking kind of negative space? What does that mean to you?
I understand the concept of negative space. I don't really think of it like that. To me, it's the space for the viewer to continue the story.
Okay. And I look at it as it is kind of what you said, to continue the story, because even if I'm just taking a portrait of a model and he or she is looking off, slightly in one direction, you kind of want to follow their gaze a little bit. And if they're in the wrong spot, they don't have room for you to interpret that inside of your own mind. And it's not that you're consciously thinking about it. You just know that something is wrong. Maybe it's out of balance, but you need to have them slightly off so that they can have room. I call it room to breathe, but it goes back to your balance and symmetry, I think.
It does.
Now, number 5 is the opposite of that. Too much negative space diminishes your subject.
Yeah, we see that a lot.
Particularly on travel photos, where they've got this grand thing and you want to have somebody, in it, and they're this tiny little speck of a person in front of a big mountain or a yacht. A yacht is a good example. I have a friend, and I won't call him out, but he took, some photos of a model on a yacht, and she's up on the yacht in a red dress, and you can't even really make out her face because she's so far away. I get the idea. You want to show someone, young and beautiful, enjoying the luxury of the yacht. All you really see is the yacht. That's the subject. She's just kind of there.
Well, I think what happens is the yacht becomes the subject. And I think in there it was kind of apparent that the girl was supposed to be the subject, and something just doesn't feel right. If the yacht's supposed to be the subject, that's fine. If you had a number of people on there, maybe it wouldn't have been as big a deal. But I think if the person is your subject, bring them forward.
And we see this with travel photos all the time. Living in Orlando, we see people, they want to stand in front of Cinderella Castle and take their picture. And they're more worried about getting the castle in than actually people recognizing that they were there in front of the castle.
Yeah, they want to run back to the back of it. Well, we always, if you've traveled, you've probably had somebody hand you a phone or a camera and say, would you mind taking a photo of us? Sure. And then they go and pose themselves and they start walking back. They're always surprised when you call them forward.
Yes.
And when you take the photo and you show them, now we can see your faces and whatever the landmark is behind them, you get this, oh, thank you.
And that happens to us all the time when we go out to Disney. People see us with our cameras and they'll say, "Oh, would you mind taking a photo for me?" And I thought, all right, I'll do it, but I'm going to do it my way. And I don't say that obviously, but
No.
we'll call them closer. And the castle is an anchor point to kind of say, I was here. But the photo is really about the people.
It is.
And
you want the person. Really, when somebody says, "Will you take a photo of me in front of
whatever
it is?"
Yeah.
That is my cue. If they say, "I'd like a photo of that," and I'm just going to be somewhere in the background, nobody ever asks for that. So I kind of know what they want. It's just maybe they don't know how to get the result that they want. And if I'm going to take a photo for somebody, I'm going to use whatever tool they give me, whether it's a phone or a camera.
And the same thing just happened to me a few nights ago. I was at a place in Orlando. It's called Lake Nona, and there's a structure out there. It's called the Beacon and the Code Wall. Really, it's just a parking garage. But in the Code Wall is they've got binary code, ones and zeros all up and down. It's got a message in it. And the Beacon is this large, I don't even know how to describe this thing, but it's a projection thing. So it'll show different images as they kind
It's
of
like an
rotate through.
hourglass tower.
Yeah, it's really, it's visually interesting. Anyways, I was out there taking photos. A couple came up and said, "Would you take our photo with this?" And sure, I did it. And I did the same thing. It's like the Beacon is illuminated from behind. I had them come up a little closer to me, and it was dusk, so I put the flash on their iPhone. It worked out really very well. The only time it didn't work is when she wanted to walk. She said, "All right, I want a full length photo." So they're getting further back, and you don't really see them very much against the Beacon.
And the little flash doesn't relate. Yeah, that doesn't
I told her, so like, this flash is not going to travel that far, and without it, you're just kind of going to be a silhouette. But she wanted it, and I took it for her. She took her boyfriend or husband, whatever he was, with them. And when they got that far back, they were just part of the overall scene. They weren't necessarily up front and present like the first photo that I took for them.
Yeah, they weren't identifiable.
That's what the problem was. There was just too much negative space, and they seemed dwarfed inside of that photograph.
Yeah. I don't want the space to become the subject. And I think that's really how I would sum up too much negative space.
And those are our 5 composition tips. And of course, these are tips, not rules. They're really good tips.
There are no rules with art at all.
Thank you very much for joining us on the Photo Flunky Show. As I said, show notes are going to be available at williambeem.com/episode 89, and a transcript of the show will be there. Screwed that one up, didn't I? And we're on iTunes, Google Play Music. We'll have links for that and other sites to subscribe to the podcast. And we'll put in maybe a couple of photos to show examples of what we're talking about. Man, I just cannot close the notes out today.
Yes. Time for lunch.
I'm going to leave now because I don't want to screw anything else up. We really appreciate you, and we'll see you again next week.